Rain had been falling for hours, the kind that makes the world feel smaller, heavier, quieter. A woman drives alone through a narrow country road, her headlights slicing through the fog like thin blades of light. Wipers drag back and forth, squeaking every time. She glances at the GPS again. Signal is gone, only static. She mutters to herself that it's fine. She remembers the turn, that she's almost there, but her hands grip the wheel tighter with each passing minute. The trees on either side seem to grow closer together, branches scraping against the truck as if trying to pull it in. Then up ahead, the outline of a house appears through the mist. It's tall and old, the kind of house built before the town even existed, with windows like blank eyes and a porch that sags under the weight of time. One light flickers faintly in the upstairs window, like someone forgot to turn it off years ago. She parks at the gate. The rain eases to a drizzle. The engine coughs once, then dies. She tries to start it again. Nothing. The radio clicks on for a second, and a faint whisper cuts through the static. It almost sounds like her name. She steps out, her boots sinking into the porch, looking around. Movement, no sound but the rain. The front door is unlocked. Drifts open under her touch. The air inside is cold, with a scent she can't name. Something between dust and something sweet. Something decayed. Floorboards creak as she walks in. Her flashlight beam moves across the walls. Old portraits hang crookedly, their faces dark with age. She stops in front of one, a woman holding a child. Her eyes are blurred, painted over. The smile is too sharp, too human. Lightning flashes. For a breath, she sees someone standing at the end of the hallway, still watching. When the light fades, the figure is gone. She calls out, asking if anyone's there. Her voice echoes back, just slightly delayed, like someone's repeating her from another room. She follows the sound deeper inside. Every door she passes is half open, every window covered in dust so thick it feels like a veil. The air grows colder with each step. From upstairs, a soft thud, and another. Then the slow, rhythmic creak of something rocking. She climbs the staircase, her hands sliding along the dusty rail. At the top, the hallway stretches longer than it should, bending in a way that doesn't make sense. Wallpaper seems to move when she isn't looking directly at it. She tries the first door on the right. Locked. The next one, locked too. Then the door at the very end slowly swings open by itself. Inside is a child's room, untouched but wrong. The rocking chair moves on its own, creaking slowly, steadily, even though there's no wind. Toys are scattered across the floor, all turned to face the mirror on the dresser. The words, "Look at it too long." She whispers to herself that it's just old graffiti, be a prank. Her voice shakes. She notices her reflection. It's not moving the same way she is. She tilts her head slightly. The reflection stays still. The rocking chair stops. Then the reflection begins to smile, a slow, unnatural stretch that reaches too far. She steps back, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The mirror ripples like water. From inside, the reflection raises its hand and presses it against the glass. Then another hand appears, and another. Pale hands pushing, clawing, leaving streaks that look like fingerprints burned into the surface. The glass begins to crack. A whisper fills the air. Same voice from the radio, whispering her name over and over, getting closer, louder, until it's behind her. She spins around. Nothing. She turns back, and the mirror is whole again. No cracks, no words, only her reflection, smiling. She runs. Down the hallway, down the stairs, her steps echoing like someone's chasing her. Every light she passes flickers. Every door she tries slams shut before she can reach it. She screams for help. The sound comes out quiet, muffled, like her voice is being swallowed. At the end of the hallway, front door, she reaches for it, doesn't move. The knob feels ice cold. She bangs on it, shouting, crying. The thunder outside drowns her out. Then she hears the creak again. Rocking chair. This time, it's right behind her. She turns. The hallway is empty. Her flashlight flickers and dies. For a moment, there's only the sound of breathing, not hers. Slow, deep, right next to her ear. She doesn't move, doesn't breathe. Then something whispers, soft as a sigh. You're home. Lights go out completely. Morning. Rain has stopped. The house stands silent, empty. The car is still parked outside, driver's door open. Inside, the floor is wet from footprints that lead to the mirror upstairs. The mirror now shows two figures. One is smiling, the other is still trying to scream. The quiet suburb of Amityville, nestled along Long Island's South Shore, was the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked, where neighbors waved from their driveways, and where the American dream seemed alive and well. Wide lawns stretched out in front of two-story colonial homes, the salty air of the Atlantic drifting in from the nearby bay. Families grilled in the summer, children rode bicycles down Ocean Avenue, and church bells marked the slow turning of Sundays. Among these homes stood 112 Ocean Avenue, a stately three-story Dutch colonial with its now famous quarter-moon windows that gazed out over the neighborhood like watchful eyes. In 1965, the property was purchased by Ronald DeFeo Sr., his wife Louise, and their children. For all appearances, the DeFeos embodied the aspirations of a prosperous Italian-American family. They had money, style, and presence. Ronald Sr., often called Big Ronnie, was the archetypal patriarch. A burly man with a booming voice, he carried himself with an authority that demanded respect, or, more accurately, obedience. He had worked his way up in the Buick car dealership owned by Louise's father, Michael Briganta, who was both wealthy and well-connected. With his father-in-law's support, Ronald provided his family with a lifestyle that many in Amityville envied. Expensive cars, lavish clothes, and a home that seemed plucked from the glossy pages of a magazine. But behind the polished veneer of the DeFeo household lurked something darker. Big Ronnie's temper was infamous. He had a brutal way of asserting control, lashing out physically and emotionally at his wife and children. Neighbors occasionally overheard shouting matches through the walls, and relatives later recalled that visits to the DeFeo home were often tense, dominated by the unpredictable moods of the patriarch. Louise DeFeo, in contrast, was more reserved, though her submissive posture toward her husband sometimes gave her the appearance of a shadow in her own home. She loved her children deeply, but her attempts to shield them from Ronald's wrath were often futile. The DeFeo children, Ronald Jr., nicknamed Butch, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew, grew up in this storm of wealth and violence. Out of them all, it was Butch, the eldest son, who bore the brunt of Big Ronnie's expectations. Butch was expected to follow in his father's footsteps, to carry the weight of family honor and success. But as he grew older, it became painfully clear that Butch was not the golden son his father demanded. At school, Butch struggled with academics and was often ridiculed for his slow progress. Socially, he was awkward, retreating into himself and simmering with resentment. By his teenage years, Butch had developed a reputation for volatility, much like his father. But while Big Ronnie's anger erupted outward, Butch's boiled internally until it became something more corrosive. Friends described him as a boy caught between privilege and pressure. On one hand, he had every material advantage. On the other, he was suffocated by the oppressive control of his father. The strain between the two men often led to explosive confrontations. Sometimes these clashes turned physical, with screaming matches escalating into outright violence. The younger children, frightened and powerless, learned to shrink into the background when these storms erupted. As Butch entered his late teens, his behavior grew more alarming. He began skipping school, dabbling in drugs, and displaying an increasingly defiant attitude. By the time he reached his early 20s, he was heavily using heroin and LSD, sliding deeper into paranoia and detachment. His relationship with his father had deteriorated into open hostility. Louise and the younger siblings watched helplessly as the tension in the house thickened, coiling tighter and tighter, like a spring waiting to snap. Yet from the outside, the DeFeos still looked like a model family. They drove Cadillacs, dressed in expensive clothes, and attended church on Sundays. Big Ronnie, despite his reputation for violence, often boasted about his family's success. He wanted the world to see the DeFeos as powerful, prosperous, and untouchable. But the truth was far uglier. The house on Ocean Avenue was a crucible of control, anger, and fear. The children lived in constant anxiety, never knowing when their father's temper might ignite. Butch, spiraling into addiction and rage, began to talk openly of hatred toward his father, muttering darkly about revenge. He had access to guns. Ronald Sr. had bought him a .35 caliber Marlin rifle for hunting, and he had begun to fantasize about using it for something far more sinister. By the fall of 1974, the atmosphere in the DeFeo home had grown unbearable. The arguments were louder, the violence more frequent, and Butch's instability more dangerous than ever. Relatives noticed, friends noticed, even neighbors noticed, but no one could have predicted just how horrific the culmination of this tension would be. The house on 112 Ocean Avenue, with its charming facade and picture-perfect lawn, was about to become the stage for one of the most infamous crimes in American history. And in the weeks and years that followed, it would become more than just the site of a massacre. It would be transformed into a legend, a house whispered about in classrooms, documented in courtrooms, and dramatized in Hollywood. But before the whispers of hauntings and tales of demonic possession, there was only the DeFeo family, bound together by blood, torn apart by violence. The murders at 112 Ocean Avenue on November 13, 1974, would forever scar the quiet town of Amityville. What began as a seemingly ordinary autumn night ended in bloodshed that shocked not only Long Island, but the entire country. The DeFeo household carried its usual tensions into the evening. At dinner, neighbors would later recall hearing muffled voices raised in anger. Inside, Big Ronnie once again belittled his son. Butch, 23 years old, absorbed the insults in silence. His father's contempt had become unbearable, and his drug-fueled paranoia left him teetering on the edge. That night, while the rest of the family drifted into slumber, Butch sat awake, consumed by rage. The house was silent except for the rhythmic barking of the family dog, Shaggy, chained outside. A rifle rested within his reach, a .35 caliber Marlin, the same gun his father had once proudly given him. At around 3:15 a.m., Butch entered the master bedroom. His father lay beside Louise, asleep and defenseless. Raising the rifle, Butch pulled the trigger. The first shot thundered through the house, striking Ronald Sr. and waking Louise in terror. She had only a second to register the horror before Butch fired again, killing her instantly. Butch then moved methodically from room to room. Dawn, 18, shot in her bed on the third floor. Allison, 13, killed with a single shot to the head. Mark, 12, executed as he slept, his crutches resting beside him. John Matthew, 9, the youngest, slain without stirring. 6 lives extinguished in less than 15 minutes. Each victim was found face down, arms tucked beneath them, as though they had been forced into that position. What unsettled investigators most was the lack of struggle. Not one of the DeFeos had attempted to flee. None had cried out. Neighbors, though close enough to hear, reported only vague thumping sounds. The Marlin rifle had no silencer. Its blast should have woken the entire block. Autopsies revealed no sedatives. Toxicology showed the victims' systems were clean. They had not been restrained, nor were there defensive wounds. The silence defied explanation. How could a man fire 8 deafening shots in a 2-story home, killing 6 people without anyone moving from their beds? Some police speculated that multiple shooters had been involved, or that a strange chemical agent might have been used, but evidence of neither was ever found. The mystery of that silence remains one of the most haunting aspects of the DeFeo murders. Aftermath. After killing his family, Butch showered, changed clothes, and disposed of the weapon in bloody clothing. He went about his day as though nothing had happened, showing up at work, complaining of boredom, even contacting friends. Later that evening, he staged his performance of discovery. Bursting into a local bar, he cried out, "You gotta help me. I think my parents have been shot." A group of locals followed him back to the house where the grisly discovery was made. The 911 call was placed, and within minutes the Amityville police arrived. Detectives who entered the house described it as a slaughterhouse. Blood soaked the sheets, the smell of gunpowder still faint in the air. One officer later admitted he could barely keep his composure. At first, Butch blamed the mob, insisting his father's underworld connections had led to the killings. The story seemed plausible on the surface, but cracks appeared quickly. Butch's timeline was inconsistent, his emotions oddly detached. The turning point came when police discovered the murder weapon in a storm drain near the house, wrapped in a bedsheet. The rifle was traced directly back to Butch. By the next day, the facade crumbled. Interrogated under pressure, Butch shifted his story repeatedly. First, he claimed his mother was responsible. Then he blamed his sister Dawn, saying she killed the family before he killed her in retaliation. Finally, he confessed outright, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop." It went so fast, even in confession, Butch added a chilling twist. He spoke of voices in the house, whispers that ordered him to kill, that compelled him beyond reason. "Greater than, it wasn't me," he told detectives. "The voices made me do it." Whether the voices were hallucinations born of drugs and mental illness, or something darker rooted in the house itself, would become the fuel for everything that followed. The trial, the media frenzy, and eventually the legend of the Amityville Horror. By dawn, news of the massacre had spread across Long Island. Reporters gathered outside 112 Ocean Avenue. Photographers captured the house with its quarter-moon windows staring coldly at the street, a place that already seemed haunted by its own silence. Amityville, a town once associated with peace and suburban comfort, became synonymous with horror overnight. Parents clutched their children tightly. Neighbors whispered about evil in the house, about how they had felt something strange in that place even before the murders. The DeFeo murders were no longer just a crime. They were a rupture in the fabric of suburban America. The dream of safety, of a perfect home in a perfect town, had been shattered in a storm of gunfire. The guilty verdict sealed Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s fate. 6 consecutive life sentences ensured he would never walk free again. The people of Amityville could breathe a little easier, or so they thought. Yet even as Butch sat behind bars, the unease never left the town. Police officers whispered about what they had seen, or rather, what they had felt inside the house. Journalists noted that Butch's story shifted constantly. Sometimes he was the killer, sometimes he blamed a shadowy figure. Other times he insisted voices in the house had commanded him. And then there was the most unsettling question of all. How had 6 people been shot, one by one, without a single cry for help? The DeFeo house stood silent, but its silence was not peaceful. Neighbors swore they sometimes saw movement in the upstairs windows. Others claimed the house gave off an energy, a cold, suffocating heaviness that made them cross the street rather than walk past. A priest who had blessed the property during the investigation later admitted he had left abruptly after hearing a deep, guttural voice command him, "Get out." And so the house waited, empty, watching. To the outside world, the case was closed, the murders solved, injustice served. But to those who lived nearby, there was an unshakable sense that something inside 112 Ocean Avenue had not ended with the trial. The DeFeos were gone, but whatever had whispered in the darkness that night was still there. Emily Carter had always been known in her neighborhood as the quiet, studious girl. She lived in a small suburban town in America, a place where everyone knew each other's business and secrets were nearly impossible to keep. Emily's house sat at the edge of a narrow street lined with maple trees, which in the autumn cast long, twisting shadows that stretched across the pavement as dusk fell. Her bedroom, tucked in the back corner of the house, overlooked the backyard where an old swing swayed in the wind even when no one was there to push it. On a chilly Friday evening, Emily had stayed up late to finish a research project for her high school history class. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, and the soft hum of distant traffic mixed with the whispers of wind through the trees created a strange, almost eerie atmosphere. Normally these sounds comforted her. They reminded her she wasn't alone. But tonight something felt different. The air in the room seemed heavier, colder, as if it carried a presence she couldn't see. Her phone sat on the desk beside her textbooks, screen glowing dimly as she referenced pages from a thick history book. Emily's focus was broken by the sudden vibration of the phone, followed by the shrill ringtone she had set weeks ago. Her eyes widened as she saw the screen. Unknown number. Her fingers hovered over the phone, hesitating for what felt like an eternity. Trembling, she pressed the green button to answer. The line was silent at first, then a soft, irregular breathing echoed through the speaker. Emily's hands shook violently. "Hello? Who is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. There was no response, only that slow, chilling laugh. It was low, hollow, almost whispering, and it made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Emily dropped the phone. Her heart pounded like a drum. She could barely breathe. "It's probably a prank. Just a prank," she murmured to herself. But the unease didn't subside. Every instinct in her body screamed at her that something was wrong, that this was no ordinary prank call. Minutes later, the same number called again. Emily's phone rang insistently, louder this time, as if it knew she couldn't ignore it. Her desk lamp flickered slightly, casting erratic shadows across the walls. She picked it up again, only to hear a distorted version of her own voice. "Emily, open the door." Her blood ran cold. The bedroom door, which she had locked, creaked slightly as though pushed by an invisible hand. The cold that seeped in was unnatural, biting through the warmth of her blanket and chilling her bones. She froze, unable to move, staring at the phone screen, which now glowed with a strange, almost sinister light. Hours seemed to stretch. The room grew darker, the shadows more pronounced, and Emily's fear escalated. Her eyes darted to the window, where she thought she saw a faint silhouette, tall, still, watching. She blinked, and it was gone. The rain outside intensified, tapping harder against the glass, almost in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. At approximately 3 a.m., Emily's phone rang once more. She could no longer deny that this was not normal. The number appeared on the screen. "Incoming call, Emily." Her hands trembled as she answered. The line was silent at first, then a voice, eerily familiar, unmistakably hers, whispered, "Emily, open the door." She felt a suffocating presence behind her. The door moved, slowly swinging on its own. Panic surged. She stumbled backward, tripping over a stack of textbooks. The wind from the slightly open window whipped her hair across her face. She gasped, heart hammering, and then the lights went out completely. Only the glow from the phone illuminated the room, casting her reflection faintly on the walls. Words blinked across the screen in a rhythm that matched her panicked heartbeat. "I am here." Emily's breath hitched. The door creaked again, louder this time, and then it slammed open with a force that made the entire room shake. A cold gust of air rushed in, and then she saw her, standing in the doorway, pale, identical to Emily in every way. But her eyes were jet black, and her smile was twisted, inhuman. "Now you study? I live your life," the doppelganger whispered. Emily screamed, trying to run, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor. Her eyes remained open, staring blankly, devoid of life. The phone slipped from her hand, still glowing, still vibrating with an unknown energy. The next morning, neighbors arrived, alerted by the rain's pounding and Emily's unanswered alarms. They found the room in chaos, books and papers scattered, the chair overturned, and Emily's lifeless body on the floor. Her phone lay on the desk, displaying a call log. "Call from Emily." Police investigations yielded no explanation. Weeks passed, but the horror did not end. Her neighbor Sarah, studying in the same neighborhood, received a similar call one rainy night. Her phone displayed, "Incoming call Emily." Trembling, she answered. A whisper came through, "I don't want to be alone. Now it's your turn." Sarah fainted, waking hours later with no memory of what had happened during that brief but terrifying moment. By now, the entire street was under a veil of fear. Phones rang randomly, always from the unknown number, and anyone who answered would collapse, pale and shaken. The townsfolk began sharing stories of shadows moving, whispers in the night, objects slightly displaced, as though unseen hands were rearranging reality itself. Mr. Johnson, an elderly man who had lived in the neighborhood for decades, decided to investigate. He entered Emily's house one stormy night, picked up the glowing phone, and a whisper immediately hissed, Now you're part of my story too. The temperature in the room plummeted, and strange white blotches appeared on the walls. Mr. Johnson realized that Emily's soul had become trapped inside the device. He warned the neighborhood, never answer unknown calls. Some, curious or skeptical, ignored the warning, and each time the same chilling words would echo. Are you ready for your turn? Emily's trapped spirit fed on curiosity and fear, ensuring that the horror spread like wildfire. New residents moved in, only to experience nights filled with ringing phones, shadows, and whispers. The terror became a permanent part of life, lurking silently in every household. Even attempts to destroy the phone proved futile. Mr. Johnson once tried to take it to an abandoned church. The moment he stepped inside, the phone lit up, whispering, "You're on my list now." The realization sank in. Emily's spirit could not be destroyed. It had found a way to exist through the fear and the unknown. And so, the nightmare continued. The phone rang each night, claiming new victims, spreading panic, and cementing Emily's story as a chilling warning. Never answer unknown calls, for curiosity can be the last mistake you ever make. And somewhere, in a dark room, the phone still rings, always whispering, "You could be next."